For those of you who don't know me, my name is George Hargis, and I am the PR manager for USPA. And today I'm really excited to be talking about wingsuit progression because it is my favorite skydiving discipline. And we are here with some of my favorite people. I would like to introduce each of our wingsuit experts. If they can just give a little wave. Do we have Ashlee and Dan on camera? Okay, perfect. So first we have Ashlee Richman, who has been wingsuiting since 2017 and organizes regularly at events as well as for Home DZ of Skydive to Land. She particularly enjoys flying with new wingsuiters, especially other women. And she co-owns and runs Arcus Flight, a wingsuit rental and training company with her husband, Dan. Welcome, Ashlee. And next we have Dan Darby, who started skydiving in 2007 and has been wingsuiting since 2013. He has competed in wingsuit performance and base competitions all around the world, but he also loves coaching newer wingsuiters and particularly enjoys flying video. Hi, Dan. And last but certainly not least, we have Nikko Mamallo, who started skydiving in 2013 and wingsuiting in 2014 and became a Squirrel endorsed wingsuit coach in 2016. He is now a Squirrel coach examiner and an AFFI based out of Skydive Kapowson. He holds several awards for recognition of promoting safety in the sport of skydiving. Hi, Nikko. All right, guys. We have a lot to cover tonight, so let's just dive right in. Let me look at this poll and see kind of who our audience members are. We've got 14 of you who have never flown a wingsuit, but you would like to. 16 of you have under 25 wingsuit jumps. 13 of you have between 25 and 75 wingsuit jumps. And a staggering 35 of you have over 100 wingsuit jumps. So that's great that we have a whole slew of all the different experience levels. There's going to be something here for everybody. We're going to start off talking about the intro to wingsuiting, but if you are an experienced wingsuiter, stick around because we have lots of stuff to go over for you guys as well. Okay, so I would like to start off with the intro to wingsuiting to kind of cater to the audience members who are here because they want to get into it. And we just have some common questions that people ask you guys all the time. So I'm going to start off with you, Ashlee. What type of skills would you recommend a person have before taking their first flight course to learn how to wingsuit? Oh, you're muted. Hold on. There we go. Try again.
Being calm is really helpful. So the more jumps you have, the better your course is going to go to begin with. But navigation is really important in wingsuiting. So starting out with some movement jumps or just generally familiarizing yourself with navigation is high up on the list of things to think about ahead of time, and really widening the scope of what you think about when you think about navigating. Most drop zone maps are small and we can fly a lot further. So it's good to be aware of potential off landing sites if you don't navigate well when you start out. I think those are two of the main things.
Yeah. Dan, do you have anything to add to that?
I mean, it kind of goes hand in hand with the calmer your mind is, the better you'll perform. Like, we're asking you to do a fairly complex set of tasks to fly an inflated thing that's around your body. And so if you are already nearing a red line on just a standard free fly jump, then zipping yourself into something and being asked to give very minute controls is going to be really mentally taxing. And so I think that, like most other sports, it's like 95% mental and only 5% physical. So the calmer you can develop your skydiving to be, I think the better you'll perform in a first flight course.
Yeah, I think that's talked about all the time in just skydiving in general, is being able to be calm and visualize, practice that visualization ahead of time. So that's a great point, Dan. Wingsuits are pretty expensive these days, and sometimes the people who want to learn how to wingsuit are very enthusiastic and they want to have their own suit like right away to start the first flight course with. Um, Dan, do you have any thoughts about that?
I have many thoughts. Uh, so there's nothing wrong with owning a suit before you take your first flight course, though realistically, the first suit that you would really want to own wouldn't be exactly acceptable for your first wingsuit flights. So we had planned on talking about this a little bit later on, but most like reputable wingsuit instructors will have access to a first flight course acceptable suit. And there's nothing wrong with owning the suit that you want to spend your first year or two in, even if that won't be what you use the first time that you fly a wingsuit.
Yeah. Nico, anything to add to that?
No, nothing really. I think Dan hit it pretty good. There's a good place that you can rent wingsuits I've kind of heard of before. Dan, maybe you have something on that?
As he sits in front of his wall, their wall of wingsuits that they have there. Oh yeah, so tell us real quick about renting suits.
Yeah, so we started Arcus in 2016 or so. And so we have quite the fleet of rental suits. We have the Sprints, Swifts, ATCs, Low-Keys, Freaks. We have Epicene Pros. We have a few Omicrons. We have Horizons. We ship the suits across the US. This is a USPA thing. So like I'm not too concerned about people from Canada asking because we don't like crossing the borders. It's just a
headache.
yeah, it's quite
Yeah,
a practical headache. But we ship all across the US. It's $250. You get 5 weeks with a suit, and then you ship it back. The shipping's prepaid both directions. So it's pretty like a simple process. You send us a rental request, you pay, you fill out the waiver of the contract, and then we ship you a suit. Like it's pretty low stress on your end.
Whether
yeah,
you rent from us or you don't, something to keep in mind when you're thinking about suits for a first flight course, your canopy should be a consideration too, and your instructor should be able to give you some advice on whether your canopy is going to be suitable for first flight courses and making sure you have the right pilot chute and bridle and all that. So we do also have wingsuit specific canopies available to demo for people who are renting suits. So everybody has their preferences, but it's good to try a canopy that is going to be docile for you while you're figuring out your deployment process.
yeah. And I think it's great also that you guys have like you said, you can have a fleet of suits. So you don't just have the beginner rental suits. You also have like if I wanted to try a Loki, I could through you guys, hopefully. So I think for those audience members who are experienced wingsuiters, if there is a wingsuit, or I guess even tracking suit, you guys have mutations. Are
Yeah,
they
me
considered
too.
tracking?
And sumos.
And Zoomies. Okay, so you can reach out to Ashlee and Dan. We will link their contact information in the email that's after this webinar. But Ashlee, you actually had a great segue into my next question, which is wingsuit specific gear. So other than the wingsuit, what other type of gear is someone taking their first flight course going to need?
Ideally a 7 cell, something docile. You definitely want to have a longer bridle. We recommend Sky Snatch 2 usually, and all of our demo canopies do come with wingsuit friendly pilot chutes. There are some rigs that are wingsuit specific or designed to make your deployments easier, but that's less of a necessity when you're starting out. It is more important to make sure you're not jumping something like cross braced and high performance and highly loaded for your first jumps.
Nico, do you have anything to add as far as like gear recommendations, things that if they're looking to get into wingsuiting, some stuff they can start kind of planning on needing?
Yeah, Ashley kind of started off pretty well. A wingsuit friendly container. As you get into wingsuiting, our deployments are a little different than falling straight down belly to earth. So dynamic corners, having the tray so it actually open up all the way. You should still jump an AAD, probably still jump an RSL. In an emergency situation, if you can't access your handle because the wingsuit's obstructing it, it's probably a pretty good idea to have your RSL connected. Your reserve canopy probably should be close to a 1-to-1, maybe something that you've flown before, probably not smaller than your main canopy. And then with your main canopy, you'll probably want to be loaded no more than like a 1-to-3 or 1.3-to-1 when you're starting out, especially. Unless you're larger than like 170 square feet, then you could probably get a little bit more highly loaded. Extended bridle, pilot chute. And then as you get into it, a semi-stainless D bag is probably a pretty good idea just to eliminate the extra bag rock and to make it faster for packing.
Yeah. What are your guys' thoughts on, I guess it just depends on where they get their coaching from. I know some coaches have like a chest mounted altimeter for their students to use. I've seen people do the water bottle method where you just take your wrist mounted altimeter and you put it on your chest. But Nikko, can you tell us a little bit about why an altimeter on your wrist might not be ideal for your first flight course or beyond?
Yeah, sure. I mean, ideally we have, I jump with three. So I have my audible, so it's giving me all the beeps and everything. I have one that's on the mud flap. And a thing to be concerned about or to think about in your head is whenever you're looking down, you're changing your body flight. So you really need to be aware of how your body is moving and flying. So as we get into wingsuiting, yeah, it's a wingsuit, but we're also moving our body and rotating our body. So we should be able to do belly jumps, pre-flight jumps, being able to look at the altimeter that's over here or over here. And if it's on our wrist, as we like move our wrist and everything, we're moving our entire wing. So it can kind of change our whole flight.
You know, it never even occurred to me to recommend to people that they try out a chest mounted altimeter like on a belly jump prior to like you just saying that. But I'm like, hey, if somebody wants to learn how to wingsuit, that's kind of a good practice to go see what it's like to look at your altimeter from your chest. I mean, your body position is going to be a little different, but it's kind of same concept.
Yeah.
Add that to my first flight course notes.
That'd be
Okay. All right. Last question about the first flight course before we take any questions from our audience is, where do you go? You want to learn how to wingsuit. You know you have to get 200 jumps. You're getting close to that point. How do you find a place to learn? I'm going to go back to you, Ashlee.
So most manufacturers do have a list of recommended coaches. Like Squirrel has a list of coaches based by drop zone that have been put through the ringer. Like Nikko mentioned, he's a coach examiner, so is Dan. There are different coach examiners around the country regionally. So if somebody has gone through the coach examiner course, then they're on the website. You can trust that they're going to give you pretty consistently streamlined necessary information for your ground school and not just be like tossing you out the plane and wishing you good luck. So check the manufacturer's website. Obviously we're pretty partial to Squirrel, so that would be our personal recommendation, but all manufacturers have instructors that they recommend. So whatever's available to you and locally at your drop zone.
Okay. And then Ashlee kind of hit it, but Dan, there's occasionally at the drop zone the guy or gal who wingsuits most frequently, and they may or may not be willing to give a first flight course. You know, it is a little bit of a touchy thing, but the USPA doesn't have any sort of ratings for wingsuit coaching, as you guys know. If I was wanting to get into wingsuiting and I was at a drop zone where someone was willing to teach me, but they weren't necessarily on one of those recommended lists by the manufacturer, what are some things I should maybe be looking out for, or like red flags that maybe would key me into like, maybe this isn't the person that I necessarily want to learn from? I'm gonna give that to you, Dan.
Must you? Um, so a lot of drop zones have somebody that has a lot of experience, but just like AFF instructors and coaches, everybody gets to develop their own personal style on how they fly. The thing that we like to see for first flight courses is like current best practices. And if somebody started wingsuiting in 1998 and their last day of coaching was summer of 1999, maybe the current techniques for the suits of this millennia have evolved a little bit, and they might not have the current best practices like in their whatever they consider a first flight course. And so if somebody is consistently doing coaching or they have many students, then like, okay, probably like reasonable enough to assume that they're doing something like not by the book, you know. We work really closely with Squirrel. I'm fairly up to date with how they think that things should be taught. Anybody that I've worked with as a coach candidate comes out with at least once having heard and said like the way that we think that it should be presented. There's also nothing wrong with finding a coach that's not local to you, right? Sometimes, like I get people who travel to DeLand just to do their first flight course with us here because they know that we can get on a bunch of loads in a single day. They know that we have a bunch of different suits and canopies available. And even though they have people that are jumping frequently at their drop zone, they might find that they're better served going somewhere else and then getting like secondary coaching with somebody because they're concerned about how the first one might go.
Yeah, I saw Nico shaking his head. Yes. So Nico, have you had people travel from, out of state to come do their first flight course with you up in Kapowsin?
Absolutely. I think it's maybe a little special, different, unique at Kapowsin, where a lot of people perceive the drop zone as like the wingsuit mecca. We have a lot of wingsuiters. We can fill the entire plane with wingsuiters. Sometimes maybe that's not the best environment for a first flight course just because it's super busy and everything. But definitely traveling is well worth it. Like beyond the first flight course, let's say we get 5+ jumps done on the next day, we may be able to get another coach and maybe make a three-way or maybe get some different perspectives. It's kind of cool being able to like travel to a well-known drop zone rather than just jumping with a buddy that happens to know how to wingsuit. They might not know like Dan said, the best methods of teaching or the things that we kind of feel are super important. And there's a lot of things that go on outside of the jump or anything that the student may see, like coordinating with the drop zone, um, making sure that the aircraft is proper and all that sort of stuff. So definitely traveling to a reputable coach is well worth it.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think, if they've checked this manufacturer website, we keep saying Squirrel, but there is, Phoenix Fly has, coaches that they recommend as well. Go to the manufacturer's website, look at their list of coaches. Also, like ask your friends who wingsuit or people that wingsuit. Be like, hey, who taught you? Where did you learn? Like kind of get their feedback. I think, yeah, there's lots of resources out there. So if you want to pursue this, you will find the right match for whoever you want your first flight course coach to be. Okay, so I'm gonna kind of wrap up my questions with the first flight course stuff, but we do have some questions from the audience. So we have an anonymous attendee that asks, what about a D handle versus pillow for a reserve handle? I'll let whoever wants to answer that gear question go ahead.
Hello.
Pillow?
Hello. D handles can be fine. The it's very thin, it's metal, it's slippery. The wingsuit can move around that handle and it could make it so your handle becomes inaccessible or hard to grab when there is fabric all around it. So either getting inside the suit or the fabric getting around the handle, it's kind of hard to figure out where it is. And the mini D handles are really bad at that. If you're going to be wingsuiting, and we talked about wingsuit specific gear container, the handle is part of the container. Get a pillow handle on your next free pack.
Okay, awesome. We have another anonymous member asking, once I experienced difficulty reaching my pilot chute, But after 1 hour in the tunnel, I had a very easy opening for the next 10 jumps and then didn't fly my wingsuit for 3 years. And I feel like I've lost my courage to fly it again. Fear of losing control, or what if she can't reach her, or him or her can reach her pilot chute again? Any advice? Wingsuit is my dream. I'll let Ashlee take that one.
So I do know somebody who had a similar situation and also went to the tunnel and felt more comfortable having just gotten back from a trip to the tunnel. It is great, but there are a lot of things that you can do on the ground to practice to make you feel more comfortable too. I personally have, like, I'm a tactile person. If you tell me what I should do with my body, I won't really get it. But if you tell me what I should feel and then I can practice that, that helps. I think that one of the double-edged swords of wingsuit development is that everything's getting kind of dummy-proofed. So there are a lot of suits that make it easier and easier and easier to deploy. And every now and then I'll try a new suit and be like, man, this is like, you can't mess this up because it just disappears. But if you are switching suits, getting too relaxed or too comfortable with an easy one can then be challenging. So it is a lot easier to build new good habits than to try to break bad ones. So start with things that you don't necessarily need on a small suit. And even when you're not wingsuiting, you can practice the same maneuver so that you can start to develop that habit and feel more comfortable. Like one of the things that I always tell people when they're struggling with their deployment is to think about pushing your thumb awkwardly in front of the gripper, like pushing the gripper out of the way. It should feel tight and strained. Like I have this really strong tendon here, like really tight and strained. Don't stop feeling uncomfortable. You should feel uncomfortable the entire way that you're coming back, because then you know the gripper is out of the way and you have clean space to get back. So that kind of thing you can practice on the ground over and over and get a feel for, okay, how uncomfortable is that going to be when I move it out of the way? And you can practice that on belly jump skydiving without putting a wingsuit on. And then you'll have those resources when you put a wingsuit back on.
I totally agree with that. And it kind of goes back to what Dan said very early on, is being calm. And I think when we've practiced something on the ground and we kind of routed our senses, like you were saying, you know, that feeling on your thumb. So when you go up in the sky, you can have that more calm confidence that you know how to get the gripper out of the way, and you'll be able to find your handle. So yeah, totally agree with you guys. Practicing on the ground. And oh, Dan has something to add. Go ahead.
Dirt dives are free. There is absolutely no shame in laying down on a mattress with your suit on in your rig and just spending 30 minutes like tensioning the suit, rotating your hand behind, doing the pushing the gripper away that Ashlee was talking about, reaching back, grabbing the pilot chute, holding the pilot chute as if you were going to throw it, and then going back into full flight on your mattress. You can do that half an hour a day, every day for a month before you go to the drop zone, so that you have already worked that out of your system before your first recurrency wingsuit jump.
I would recommend doing that either with somebody videoing you or with somebody who knows what they're doing watching you, because we have seen video of somebody saying, like, I don't understand, look how perfectly I'm doing this. And you understand why it's not working in the sky when you see it demonstrated on the ground. So you can practice something over and over, but if you're practicing it the wrong way, that's not going to help you. So practice it with somebody knowledgeable watching.
Thank you. Good clarification.
That's awesome. Yeah, great advice from both of you. Want to get to more of these questions. So this is kind of leading us into more progression, but Aaron asked, what are some drills to focus on, and what would you recommend for a wingsuit pilots with less than 25 jumps? Do you recommend solo flights? Why or why not? I'm going to shoot over to Nikko real quick, and then Ashlee and Dan, if you have anything to add, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, I don't want to talk about it too much because yeah, we do have this question coming up, right? With solos, there's only so much that you're going to be able to learn. You don't have any sort of fixed point of reference to see how you're flying. If you're flying too fast, too slow, too steep, too head-eye. The more jumps with either coaches or experienced wingsuiters, people that have a lot of wingsuit jumps, the better. That might be kind of hard to do at some drop zones. But if you are doing solos, it's really good to have some sort of intention behind your jump, not just jumping out and Yahoo, I hope I make it back to the drop zone. Get a feel for what it feels like, what it sounds like. How did that thumb position feel when you're doing those practice grips? Or if you're jumping with a fly sight, being able to have some sort of measurable data. Um, I don't have any sort of like specific drills Dan or Ashley might have. I think they do, yes.
Very different approaches to how we used our solos in our progression. And so like a lot of it's going to depend on what you want to get wingsuiting and how you operate mentally and what works for you with the way that you learn. When I was learning, there were no wingsuiters locally who would jump me in a small suit 90% of the time if Dan was working at the tunnel. So I had a lot of solos, and I probably spent like 70% of my solos in my first 100 wingsuit jumps were with a fly sight. So we'll talk more about this. I'm sure this will come back up, but fly sights are actually a great tool to be able to measure in real time. Like you can get with somebody who can teach you how to configure it, but you can configure it so it talks to you and will give you feedback in real time. So if you are told by an instructor or an experienced wingsuiter or a friend, this is what you should do with your body if you want to go steeper or faster forward or whatever, you can get the real-time feedback of your glide ratio, your horizontal speed or your vertical speed, and you can get the feedback that a coach might be able to give you or flying relative with somebody might be able to give you. But it does require wanting to sit down with a computer and check out some graphs afterwards too. So I thought it was very helpful in my progression, and I don't do wingsuit performance competition anymore because I don't enjoy competition environments that much personally. But I do think that it's incredibly useful for gauging what kind of results different body configurations actually give you.
Yeah, that's great advice. Dan, did you have anything to add to that, or?
He made himself really uncomfortable.
For very specific purposes, that's how she started. It depends on where you want your wingsuit journey to take you. If like I would advise somebody to do something very different if their goal was acrobatic competitions versus wingsuit base or performance flying. There is definitely value in just spending time flying a suit, but I think that for every X number of jumps, that value percentage does decrease over time, right? And so in the beginning, yeah, you do your first flight course, you do your first 5-10 wingsuit jumps with a coach, and then go have some time to just feel the suit inflated around you and have some like quiet time in your brain to just understand what the body is doing without some coach next to you saying, straighten your legs, check your arm, like do all these other things without having to do all the exercises that are probably being asked of you during your first flight course. It's also a great time to practice like pitch changes and all of the things that become necessary in your next 100 or so wingsuit jumps, without somebody there like guiding you through the whole thing. Getting comfortable flying the suit there's definitely value to that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, we do the same thing when we're teaching someone how to skydive and they're getting their license. They go and they do solo skydives, and it's so you can kind of remove the coach, the sense of like I'm performing for someone kind of, and just being able to feel and relax and be in the moment. And you can learn a lot from those solo jumps. So great answers, guys. We do have tons more questions in the comments. I promise we will try to get to them all, but I do want to kind of move on from this topic for now, and then we'll try to get more questions for the beginners at the end. We did talk about going on solos versus flying in groups, but let's talk about flying in groups. Let's say, done with the first flight course, has gone out and done some solos. What's the next step when it comes to flying in groups? How to approach that safely, in a fun way where they're going to learn? Nikko, I'm going to throw it back to you. Do you have advice for those first group wingsuit jumps?
Keep it small. Um, it's awful tempting once you get a wingsuit and you start to feel like, cool, I got this, and you have 10, 15 wingsuit jumps to want to go do a four-way with your buddies. And it's hard to understand when you first start wingsuiting the amount of power behind the suit, and the amount of control that you need to have. There's very little margin for air once you start incorporating all these bodies. So keeping it small, keeping it to a two-way with another experienced wingsuiter. Don't be the most experienced wingsuiter when you only have 15 wingsuit jumps. That's just asking for trouble. And I travel a lot to a bunch of different drop zones, and people are like, "Oh yeah, we do two ways, and we get close," and people are like 200 feet away, and like close needs to be close, 10 feet, 15 feet, 20 feet, maybe a little bit closer than that. And if you were jumping with lesser experienced wingsuiters, you're not going to have that relative distance. You're going to be so far away. And if you try and push and try and get to them, you're going to have all of this power and energy and speed and momentum to run into a situation where you might have a collision or something like that. Um, Keep it small. Two ways are amazing. I still do two ways, and they're rad. You can learn so much, and you only have one person that you need to keep your eyes on, not moving your head and looking all around trying to keep track of everybody.
Yeah. Ashlee, Dan, anything to add to that?
We have a general rule at our drop zone that we don't have a lot of like teeth at the drop zone in terms of power to stop anybody from doing anything, but our general guidance rule that we tell people is when you're starting out, you should have a combined minimum of 100 wingsuit jumps between the two of you. And that doesn't mean add 5 people with 20 wingsuit jumps each, but 2 people with that combined number so that that the less experienced somebody is, the more experienced the other person is with them. And obviously some people progress faster than others, so maybe you need more than that in some groups, and maybe you think that you're together, but you're not really together, and it stops being useful at a certain point. But what Nikko said is spot on, that the further away you actually are in that jump, the higher those closing speeds and the more reckless that becomes. One thing I would also say about starting to fly with people, we get this a lot with rental requests. People who want to rent a larger suit before they have the minimum recommended number by the manufacturer. We strictly enforce no exceptions, that number. But that's the recommended minimum. If you are struggling to stay with a buddy and the buddy says, "Hey, why don't you put on a bigger suit? It'll make life easier." Stop taking the buddy's advice, because they probably don't know what they're talking about. If you are struggling with your lateral movement and you're really aggressive through your turns, putting on a bigger suit is not going to make you a safer second person on that skydive. It's just going to make you a lot faster when you're screaming across the sky at them. So don't upsize to fly with friends. I will always prefer somebody in a small suit to jump with than somebody who is upsized too quickly in order to get on a group jump.
Yeah, I feel like there was a collective like pursing of the lips when you said that people try to rent suits that are they don't have the minimum for, and I think that's prevalent, extremely prevalent in our community. And I think a lot of coaches are trying to guide people to do otherwise. But yeah, they're going to make their own choices. But like Ashlee said, I think there's probably a large number of the wingsuiters who are in this audience who have that 100 wingsuits and above, and they know the person that upsized too quickly, and they're maybe not fun to fly with or scary to fly with. And so you also don't want to be that person either that is upsizing their suit too quickly and not in control of it and making everyone else on the skydive nervous. So, all right, moving on, because we could talk about that all day long.
Come back for round 2.
Yeah, come back for round 2. Okay, well, actually, this was my next question I had written down. So, suit progression. That's so funny. I didn't realize that was my next question. All right, Nikko, thoughts on suit progression?
Many thoughts. You should be able to fly that suit in every orientation and every type of situation. Um, Solos, two ways, bigger ways, in the base, next to the base, several slots away from the base, diving out first, diving out last. Be comfortable with the suit. Like if we're talking about Swift to an ATC or an ATC to a freak, when we progress, we want to make sure that we're going in those steps. We don't want to go like Swift for 50 jumps and then a freak or less. I've seen it happen where people progress pretty quickly, and everyone learns at different rates. Everyone progresses at different rates. But even at 50 jumps, there's so much more to learn with that Swift. Like I was just in Florida a month ago, and Ashley, Dan, and I were in Swifts, and it was amazing. It's so much fun, like to put that suit on, and you can whip it around. You can try doing all these different things that in a big suit, it's not going to be as forgiving. And in the big suit, if you get it into a weird, awkward situation that you haven't been in before, you're gonna wish that you had that smaller suit on when you're in that weird, awkward situation. So like a season in the suit, maybe more, kind of really depends on you and how you progress and how many jumps you're doing. If you're doing 5 jumps a season, you probably are gonna spend a long time in that suit. Um, Dan, Ashley.
So we would always rather see somebody spend more time in the Swift or equivalent, have slightly less time in an ATC or equivalent before moving on to a freak or equivalent, then meet the minimums to get into the ATC, meet the minimums to get into the freak. You'll see a dramatic return on your time investment by staying in the smaller suit a little bit longer, being in the intermediate suit for an intermediate time frame, and then getting to an advanced suit when you actually have the requisite skill set versus getting into an intermediate suit right as you are by the numbers allowed to, and just being terrified for your first 40 jumps in that suit, and you're not actually getting to learn as much per jump as you could be. And so like we would always rather see somebody spend more time earlier on, less in the middle, so that we can get to the bigger suits with, again, a calmer brain and more relative skill.
And Swifts have a lot of power. Like Dan has led flocks with creatures and freaks and ATCs while he is in a Swift, and everybody is working and everybody is comfortable. So a suit being too small is never the issue. Working on adding the skills in whatever suit you're in is the best way to be a safer and more successful skydiver.
Yeah. I totally agree with what all of you guys just said. And I had a meme moment when Danny said longer in the small suit, intermediate time. I was like, say louder for the people in the back. Like rush into that intermediate suit, you're not going to be comfortable flying the next level up any faster. You're probably actually hurting yourself. So that's all I have to say about that. And this kind of leads me to an audience question that was asked kind of multiple times early on, but people have question about flat spins. And this wasn't necessarily on our pre-planned question list, but I think it is something that people are very curious about. Flat spins. What do you guys do? What do you recommend people do? I will let Nikko go first. We're just kind of going around in a circle, I guess.
Me again? Okay. Well, try and correct it. A flat spin is a stall, right? We put ourselves in a weird situation where we're turning about ourselves. Ideally, we want to point ourselves down towards the ground, get airspeed, and recover. If it gets to we start to feel a little lightheaded or we might pass out, pulling is going to be our number one priority. We had too many, I don't really want to count, wingsuit flat spin AED fires this last season. And it ranged from people being knocked out to people trying to fight it to people not being able to get to their handles, altitude awareness or whatever. It is something that we should act quickly. We should Think back to our belly and our AFF, right? We try 2 times and then we pull. If you can't correct it, if you can't correct that spin, if you can't correct that thing, or if you want that ride to slow down, pull your parachute. You're going to be thankful that you have a parachute at 7,000 feet or whatever altitude it is and have a long canopy ride rather than having a parachute at AED altitude and having no time to fix it and then just being at the mercy of where that parachute wants to fly. Hopefully it's level.
Yeah, and potentially line twists in that reserve if you were still in a flat spin when you had to, when the AAD fired. So yeah, agreed. Ashlee, Dan, Ashlee, whoever wants to go.
I thought that that was a succinct explanation. Like a flat spin is an asymmetrical stall. I haven't seen any true flat spins recently. They've been a lot of out of control flight, but nothing has been flat about it. It's been tumbly and towards the ground. But like Nico said, like the steeper you can get, the closer aligned to our chord line, our head to toe line, you can get the relative wind, the sooner you're going to break that asymmetrical stall. So typically by flying steeper, they'll break the stall faster, you'll regain control.
The term flat spin is like this catch-all for scary out of control flight. And so a lot of new wingsuiters want to know about it and what to do with it or think that they've had it and might not have ever actually experienced it. I was one of those for a very long time, and that I referred to a lot of things that were not flat spins as flat spins because I hadn't experienced a true one. When you are in a smaller suit or when it's a lower speed out of control spin, there's kind of this like old school mentality that some of you may have heard of, like banana, banana, banana. Which is just, break everything down, make your body look like this little banana to make it stop spinning, which works if it's slow and not actually that scary. Worked for me on my first not actual flat spin. But in a big suit with a very fast speed where like your vision's getting tiny and it starts to feel very scary and real, you won't be able to break it down. Like when I had one, I couldn't get to my handle, but I was able to be like, okay, so worst case scenario, I'm going straight to my reserve. I was at 10 grand, so it was not a big deal. I think I was out of it by 10. But the getting vertical and trying to fly at the ground ended like that. So even though it feels like the last thing that you want to do or think that you can do, and it seems like it can't possibly work and you just want to ball up, sometimes it's too fast and you can't ball up to stop it. And when that happens, aim for the ground.
Yeah. I think what you guys touched on is exactly right. And it kind of also goes back to very early on when we talked about being calm and comfortable in your flight ability. And so if you're jacked on adrenaline and you're like super fearful of a flat spin happening, and then when it starts happening, I think the knee-jerk reaction is people just kind of go into freeze mode a lot of the time, and I mean, the world is kind of disoriented, and so it's really hard. So I think that really goes back to like needing to drill in the visualization, the calmness that you need to be when you're flying in your wingsuit. You don't want to be jacked up on adrenaline, and visualizing like what you would do in that situation is super important. So all right, moving on to next question. I was kind of reading through the chat. We got some really funny commentary, but I'll share it with you guys later. We could tell we got our wingsuit friends watching in the crowd. Okay, so wingsuiting at a new DZ. So, this is basically for all levels of wingsuiters. Maybe there's some of you in the audience that haven't traveled too much. But what would you guys recommend if it was my first time showing up at a brand new DZ? I want a wingsuit. What should I do? Nico.
It kind of depends on how seasoned of a wingsuiter you are and how comfortable you are in a wingsuit. If you're kind of newish to wingsuiting and you haven't been to the drop zone before, there's no harm in doing a slick jump. Maybe pulling a little bit high. Like even if you're at a new drop zone first time, might as well pull a little bit high just to kind of get a lay of the land. see where the landing area is, figure out which way is north, look at your outs and all that sort of stuff. If we're wingsuiting at this drop zone, it's our first time there, we really want to look at the overhead map. I know Ashlee has a fun game with trying to figure out where this little section of the map is in relation to the drop zone. We kind of want to know like what kind of aircraft they're running. If the pilots have seen a lot of wingsuiters, because sometimes you show up at a drop zone and they're like, "Ooh, that's a wingsuit. I haven't seen one of those before," and they don't know how they should configure the aircraft. And if you don't know how to configure or how the aircraft should be configured, because maybe you didn't take a first flight course from a coach who actually teaches you about the aircraft and things, it's something you really want to consider, because a jump run for a belly jumper and that airspeed is going to be a little bit different than what we would like for wingsuiting. So you want to know about like what kind of aircraft, what kind of aircraft configuration, what their jump run is, their different patterns, where our aircraft are going to be flying and descending. Do they have any sort of special exit for wingsuiters? A lot of drop zones have like a seated exit. So if it's your first time and you're new to wingsuiting, do some slick jumps, maybe get a lay of the land, get a little bit comfortable with the drop zone first would be my recommendation. Because if you go straight into it and you get turned around and you don't know where the drop zone or the landing area is and you are 2 miles out, you could be putting yourself in a less ideal situation.
Awesome. And for any of you, when Nikko was talking about, you need to talk to the pilot about how to fly the plane. If you're like, I don't know how the pilot should fly the plane, I'm not a pilot. I believe there's an article, am I not mistaken, that Ashlee, go ahead, tell me where they can find it if they don't know what I'm talking about.
It's on the Squirrel website. There's actually, you can print it out and give it to any drop zone pilot. And it has the configurations for a safe wingsuit exit for every type of jump plane. So tell the pilot what kind of speed, how the deck should be, how level. It's got everything you need, and you can just print it out, hand it to the pilot if you're concerned about it. And if you have any issues with your local pilots not configuring it safely, any tail strikes or near tail strikes, printing it out and making sure that your pilot has it can be helpful too. That's just on I think it's on the Squirrel website. We can add it to the list of links for you later.
Awesome. Yeah, everyone who's here and registered will get an email. We'll put all these helpful links for you guys in the email. Okay, so back to first time in a new drop zone. I want a wingsuit. Other than the things that Nikko already mentioned, Ashlee, what do you think would be another thing top of the list to think about?
Ask around if there are any local wingsuiters. Get advice from them on things so that you don't make it harder to be a wingsuiter at that drop zone. As you know, we want to make friends when we go to new places, right? And if there's a strict rule that wingsuiters are never allowed to land in the main landing area if there are tandems, or don't cut off the tandems, whatever the sometimes obvious and sometimes less obvious rules are at a particular drop zone, you want to know about them, because if you break them, then you might not be able to wingsuit there, or maybe the other wingsuiters might not be able to wingsuit there. And maybe local wingsuiters have tips of like, hey, we've got all these different planes at our drop zone, but if this pilot is flying this plane, good luck to you. The standard exit's not going to work. Stay totally balled up and expect this kind of exit. Not every pilot will do what is safest or in the best interest of wingsuiters sometimes. It's just kind of the nature of the sport. So we need to be able to have that extra knowledge and then alternate ways to work around it wherever possible. So best way to do that is make friends and be honest about your experience and skill level when you meet other wingsuiters. It's a pretty awkward thing to ask somebody when they show up at the drop zone. Like, I don't really want to ask, so how experienced are you? Should you really be flying that wingsuit? Like, don't make us ask. Always better to downplay your skill level and pleasantly surprise somebody than oversell and underdeliver.
I agree. That goes for a lot of things in life, not just wingsuiting. Dan, do you have anything to add to first time wingsuiting at a new drop zone?
Some locals might have like very specific landmark instructions. Like I know that Paris, you're only allowed to fly on one side of the drop zone. Like I don't remember if it's east or west or north or south, but like you butt up against like military airspace and you're not allowed to enter it. Where else have we seen those? I know I remember flying at some other southern drop zone, and if you got over the river, you'd gone too far, so you had to make your turn back. Like they can have very specific like recommendations or rules, so it's worth asking around.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, one last thing I'm going to add to what you guys all said is carry a cell phone in your pocket, and before you get on the plane, make sure you have the number to manifest or to ground, whoever needs to know if you land off. I think that's a thing that people forget. They bring their cell phone, but then they're like out there landing off or maybe need help, and they're like, oh, I don't know the number. So get that number in your phone right away when you first show up. That way, if you do need to contact the ground crew or manifest to let them know where you are, you have that access to information. Okay, moving right along. Let me see if we have any questions in the chat. Okay, so this kind of goes to what we were talking about, different aircraft. Aaron asked, what can you share about jumping a King Air with a wingsuit? So I don't know if you guys, have you guys done a lot of King Air exits? If you don't, now you guys are caravan mostly.
I've done some King Air.
How was it?
It's fast, skinny. Just like any other wingsuit exit, like we don't want to present our chest or any part of our body into that relative wind. If that airspeed is coming at you faster and the door is skinnier, that just means we have to get smaller and lower and really try and point down towards the wheel of the aircraft that has like landing gear or something off on the side. Otherwise, like out towards the wingtip, but low. We don't really want to present any of this and go aft.
Yeah, I think that's I think just that question in general, being aware of the different aircraft that you might be jumping, do a little research before you go to a drop zone, see what aircraft they're going to be flying. And if you don't know how to exit that aircraft, you have time to, look it up, ask people before showing up and trying to figure it out. Okay. Someone asked, okay to do a wingsuit jump on a C-182, Cessna 182. You guys are just smiling, looking
Absolutely,
casual.
yeah.
Any advice?
Depending on the pilot and their comfort, getting onto the step is really nice first. It can be a little bit challenging, but getting out there so that you can keep everything balled up, keeping your elbows tight to your rib cage, keeps the air inlets relatively closed off. And then you can just step off sideways so that you're clear of the horizontal stabilizer behind you. But they fly so slowly that it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Another question about flat spins and exit. Okay. So this kind of goes into what we're talking about. You guys don't necessarily have to get too in depth. This is someone who has never wingsuited before but wants to get into it. And they said, can you talk a little bit about the exit? And that's just something they're a little bit concerned with. So in a little nutshell, what are some thoughts you could give this person? Any of you? Sorry, Nico, go ahead first. I'm kind of doing the around in the circle thing.
This should definitely be discussed with whoever is doing your first flight course and drilled heavily. So I don't want to like go too in depth on it because I don't know what plane you're in or how tall you are or all of these different things. But there are lots of tips specific to whoever the person is and where they're jumping to. But generally, thinking about keeping your chest down to your knee is very important, and making the decision to open after exiting the plane a conscious one and not an oops reaction. So what we don't want is to be upright and open as we're leaving the plane and nearing the tail. So most important things are thinking about entering the relative wind, not jumping out of the plane. Like if we're thinking about trying to fly into the wind, we'll stay low and not upright, and then we'll be less likely to hop up and out. But keeping your hands closed back behind you is pretty important. So it's intentional and not accidental.
Yeah, I think that was the perfect answer in a nutshell. Like, there is a ton of different recommendations for the different type of aircraft, but we won't go too much into that. All right. We're going to talk about base jumping later. Don't worry. More progression. Oh, this is a great question. What order do you recommend doing your housekeeping tasks after deploying your main? So, Nico, what do you do?
After you looked up and made sure that you have a good canopy, arms, at that point, maybe you need to make sure you re-rise or turn to make sure you're staying upwind or point towards the drop zone. I mean, there isn't a whole lot of housekeeping. It's arms, tail, slider, and so you're flying your parachute. It depends if you're kind of in a long spot. If you're in a long spot, maybe you want to do some things before you do your other things, but you really need your arms undone. Unless you're in a real big emergency and you're dealing with something up here, you might be able to reach up with your arms still zipped up. And if you're in a real big emergency, you really don't need to mess with your tail. Your tail should be kind of like last on your priority right before popping your toggles. A lot of people will try and unzip their tail. And then we have all this extra fabric that's kind of out flopping in the wind that we don't have control over. It's something that we can go over more in depth with emergency procedures in a first flight course type deal, but really with housekeeping, arms, tail, slider, you're flying your parachute back home.
Awesome. And then Ashlee and Dan, I'm going to keep going to the next question unless you have anything that you really want to add to that. No. Okay. I just like looked at the time and I was like, oh my God, we still have so much to cover. Okay. So, I'm going to get back to the questions in the group chat, just because these are people who are here now wanting to learn. And then we might have to do a part 2 like some other day, because there's literally so much stuff we want to go over still. But going back to, Keith said he would email his question. All right. I have around 20 wingsuit jumps, mostly out of a caravan and otter, in which I exit like a penguin entering the water. Can't do that out of a pack or else I'll hit the aircraft's left flap. So far, I've sat in the door and hopped out, or most recently did a dive out like on a big way, always keeping wings closed and arching hard. The experienced jumpers have told me to do a bunny hop facing the prop, but I end up cartwheeling every time. Tips for exiting a pack.
We do this a lot. We talk about pack exits frequently. We have one, we used to have 2. That's one of our most used aircraft, especially in the summertime. For the pack exit, I've adopted what I have called like the West Coast exit or the Elsinore. What you end up doing is you put your right knee on the ground. You put your right hand over the lip of the doorway, and you're supporting your body weight on your arm with your other hand back behind your rig. And you're basically going to pivot over your right arm so that your torso is already in line with the relative wind. You're like half squatted down and you're already in line with the relative wind. Your arm stays attached to the plane until you fall below it, and then you're off underneath it and flying. I don't like the idea of bunny hopping out of any plane.
I also definitely don't like bunny hopping, but I like left foot first, so I've never tried the West Coast exit because it just feels wrong to me, and I don't know why I'm like a left foot person first when I'm a righty, but I have a lot of exits out of the pack, and I always just think about trying to touch your chest to your knee gets you oriented correctly, and the fear of hitting the flaps, I've never been afraid of hitting anything low on the pack. The tail is always a thing to be worried about. But if you're, you should be at an angle, not a perpendicular to the exit, but at a slight angle, the trajectory that you want to be getting off of jump run. And I like left foot first, chest down to my knee, hands back, like we tell people who are newer to hold on to their BOC. And oh, sorry.
It's just been USPA. He's awesome. Hi, Brian.
We tell people to hold on to their BOC until they are clear of the aircraft and see it leaving, and then you can open your tail and your arm wing at the same time. But keeping your hands on your BOC ensures that you stay closed and your chest is down your knees. So those are some like physical indicators that'll put you in a safe orientation as you're entering the wind, instead of do not hop out. No hopping, please.
Yeah. Okay. So I think I'm gonna just focus on the kind of what you can do after wingsuiting, but rather do it in question format. I'm just gonna ask each of you kind of, the direction your progression has taken you, what kind of things you like to do, and things that you have experienced. Is that okay, instead of going question by question for the last 4?
Sure.
We good? Okay. All right. So, Nikko, I'm going to start with you. So, as you said, as I said in your bio, I think you said you started wingsuiting in 2013?
2014 maybe?
Yeah.
Somewhere in there.
So now we're 2024, 10 years later, right? Yeah. Right? Okay. What do you do? What do you like to do?
I mostly fly camera. Like if I had a choice and I showed up to the drop zone and I have all my wingsuits with me and there's small suits, big suits, blocks, whatever. I typically fly outside camera. I think Dan kind of does the same thing where it's fun to like figure out the angle and figure out where to put your head and put the formation and like fly with that big huge weight on your head, and find a creative shot. Or maybe it's people that are trying to work on things and having that solid video to like give them good feedback. Or it's really cool sometimes to like just orbit around the formation, but it's not the most usable coachable video. It's often a challenging slot to fly. You have to anticipate what the group's going to do. You have to be able to power up and fly your suit. Sometimes you're on the outside of the turn, so you really have to push hard. And for me being a little bit on the shorter side, it's hard to do, and it's a cool challenge for me. And if I'm not doing that, one-on-one coaching is great. Flying with small suits, I think small suits are underrated. Not enough people fly them. If somebody came up to me with a small suit, I will happily grab my small suits and go fly with them.
Awesome. Real quick again, Nikko, any like camps or boogies or events that you've gone to for wingsuiting that you would recommend to people?
I haven't been to a boogie in years. Boogies are fun, camps are fun. I think I would prefer to do a camp, something that's a little bit more structured. You kind of know what you're getting into. There's not going to be random people showing up. When you get to the boogie environment, I've done a lot of wingsuit boogie stuff. People like kind of like what you said earlier, or Ashlee said earlier, oversell themselves a little bit. And then it comes time to put together a 4-way, a 6-way, 8-way, and 4 people aren't there because they kind of oversold their abilities. But in a camp, typically we're all there to progress. And typically we're all pretty honest with ourselves. So if you can find a good camp to really work on things, that's what I would vote for.
Okay, awesome. Ashlee, what kind of, with your wingsuit progression, any boogies, events, camps, disciplines?
So I started doing a lot of performance in the beginning just because I did so many solos with the fly site. But the thing that actually opened the doors for is cloud runs, industrial haze run. And yeah, I think they're really fun.
We travel outside of the US for the
Yes,
non-USPA
very
group
fun.
member drop
Yes.
zone.
Carving those
Yes.
clouds at the foreign drop zones.
Personal preference, but I typically prefer camps to boogies. I haven't been to very many. We just got back from Pepe's Island, and that was really beautiful, and there were tons of wingsuiters, and that was a great experience too. But I really enjoy camps that are a little more structured, where you're with all of the same people and you're getting to try different things and watch yourself and other people progress. And my personal favorite slot is usually leading. Like I like watching other people get to push themselves and learn new things, and I like seeing them be excited about it. And also, I'm kind of a control freak about navigation, so that's like I feel safest when I know everybody's experience level and everybody's preferences, and I like trying to make everybody happy at the same time, so trying to figure out like where you can put everybody where they're getting to do what they want to do, but also everybody's relatively safe-ish as you can be in a camp environment, and then get to see the growth is my favorite. So last year we did a bunch of camps. This year is like the boogie year where we're traveling a lot more. Like we'll be going to Canada for a camp that we're organizing at in August, and I'll be organizing an assist event at Skydive Shenandoah. So more travel to come this year, but we want to be doing more camps. So if anybody has an interest in coming to, we did last year 2 intermediate camps, so like low-key ATC size suits, and then 1 advanced invitational. So if you don't know us personally, but you are interested in doing an invitational, feel free to email us through our Arcus website. I'm Richman@arcusflight.ws, but just email and we'll put you on the list. So when we organize more next year, if it's something you're interested in doing, we really like organizing events here. So I like camps.
Me too. All right, Dan, what do you like? What have you done? What would you recommend?
So I didn't mean to end up on the United States parachute team for wingsuit performance flying. But the first year that I was in Lauterbrunnen, somebody asked me if I wanted to race wingsuits like from Via Ferrata. And like I was like, huh, yeah, let's do that. And that was one of the most fun jumps that I had that entire summer. I was flying in a straight line, not next to anything. And so I was like, I want to get into this. And like I wanted to go to like the World Wingsuit League and the World Base Race in Norway and do all of that. And so I knew that in order to get to go to those things, I had to learn how to fly fast and like efficiently. And so I ended up doing a bunch of fly site jumps and nationals and all that stuff. And it's still hugely entertaining to me to nerd out to graphs and like debriefing myself about where I left something on the table. So like even today I was working with a student who's getting into base, and we were doing some like pre-base training in the sky using a fly site, talking about like the speed ranges that are and are not appropriate to fly, and where we can convert speed into lift and how we can utilize that energy that we develop. So numbers are real fun. I like that a lot. But also I have fallen in love with trying to capture videos and pictures, and I've become a bit of a camera nerd. Yeah, I really like flying video because it's not something that like it's really hard to get good video of yourself, and to be able to provide that to somebody of like a special moment that they have, I think is really unique.
Yeah, for sure. All right, guys, like I said earlier, we could talk about wingsuiting all night because we're all of us so passionate about it, but we are unfortunately out of time. Thank you all who came, and if we didn't touch on what you wanted to hear, I'm so sorry, but I do know that, and I hope you guys don't mind me speaking for you, but these guys love to help other people achieve their wingsuit goals. So when you send out the email, we will have their contact information on there. So if you have any more specific questions that you would like to go over in person with them, I'm sure. I mean, give me like an X if that's like a no-go, but I'm thinking, yeah, they're like, bring it on, bring it on. Okay. So this is recorded. It will be sent out to you. So if you missed the beginning, you will get a link to the video, and then you can share with your friends who couldn't attend tonight. Thank you so much, Nico, Ashlee, and Dan. It was such a pleasure. I can't wait to fly with all of you again.
Woo, thank you so much for having me.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.